I don't care what your ticket says. People like you don't sit in seats like this. So move, before I have security drag you off this plane." The shrill voice of the flight attendant cut through the hushed atmosphere of the first-class cabin like a serrated knife, shattering the peace of a Tuesday morning. It was a scene that would haunt the witnesses for years to come. A moment where prejudice masqueraded as protocol. Elena Ross had stepped onto the aircraft with the kind of calm confidence that usually commands respect without demanding it. She wore a tailored beige blazer over a sleek charcoal dress, her natural curls cascading, framing a face that held a quiet, intellectual intensity. And in one hand, she clutched a leather laptop bag, while the other held the boarding pass that would soon become the center of a storm. She made her way down the aisle, her eyes scanning the numbers with a practiced ease, ignoring the subtle, curious glances from passengers who seemed surprised to see a young woman of color navigating the premium section with such familiarity. As she reached seat 2A, she smiled politely at the elderly gentleman beside her, stowed her bag overhead, and settled in, immediately pulling out a notebook to jot down thoughts for her upcoming meeting, her focus absolute and her demeanor serene. But peace, it seemed, was a luxury she would not be afforded today. Moments later, Karen Miller, a flight attendant with a crisp uniform and a gaze as sharp as broken glass, marched through the cabin, her eyes scanning the rows like a predator seeking weakness. She paused at row 2. Something about Elena, perhaps her youth, perhaps her skin, or perhaps simply the quiet dignity she exuded, seemed to offend Karen's sensibilities. The flight attendant's expression tightened into a mask of disdain as she stepped closer. "Excuse me," Karen said, her tone wrapped in a politeness that was razor-thin and dripping with suspicion. "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Elena looked up, surprised but unfazed, and handed over the document with a small, cooperative smile. "Of course." Karen scanned the ticket, her frown deepening as if the printed words were a personal insult. "This is for first class," Karen stated, as if waiting for a confession of theft. "Yes," Elena replied, her voice steady and soothing. "That is correct." Karen handed the pass back, but her eyes lingered on Elena with a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. She walked away, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Elena tried to shrug it off, returning to her notes. Unaware that near the galley, Karen was whispering frantically to another attendant, casting dark looks in Elena's direction. It wasn't long before Karen returned, her posture rigid with misplaced authority. "Miss Ross, step aside! I need to verify something," she commanded, not asking, but ordering. Elena, perplexed but still maintaining her composure, followed Karen to the galley, feeling the weight of 50 pairs of eyes burning into her back. "I'm going to have to ask you to move," Karen said, crossing her arms, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper that carried through the silence. "There has been a mistake with your booking. This seat isn't appropriate for you." Elena's brow furrowed, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. "A mistake? I booked this weeks ago, it's confirmed." But Karen was not listening. She was operating on a bias so deep it blinded her to reason. "I don't have time to explain. Move to the main cabin, or I call security." The threat hung in the air, ugly and raw. Eleanor looked at Karen, really looked at her, and for a split second the fire of injustice flared in her eyes, but she extinguished it instantly, replacing it with a chilling calmness. She nodded once. She returned to her seat, gathered her things, and began the long walk of shame to the back of the plane, escorted by a smug Karen. The humiliation was visceral. Passengers whispered, some averting their eyes in sympathy, others watching with morbid curiosity, as if she were a criminal being transported. Karen pointed to a cramped middle seat in economy. "Sit here," she instructed, before turning on her heel and marching away. Leaving Elena squeezed between two strangers, her legs pressed against the seat in front of her. Elena stared out the window, her face a mask of stone, but inside, her mind was racing, calculating, and strategizing. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and typed a single message. When she hit send, a small, knowing smile touched her lips. A smile that whispered of a storm coming, one that Karen Miller would never see until it was too late. The hum of the engines was a steady drone, a stark contrast to the turbulent atmosphere that had settled over the plane. where the air felt heavy with unspoken words and the awkward tension of witnessed injustice. Elena sat in the cramped economy seat, her posture as regal as it had been in first class, ignoring the pitying looks from the passengers around her. She was an island of calm in a sea of discomfort. She scrolled through her contacts, her movements precise and deliberate, and made a quick, hushed call. "Hello, it's me," she whispered, her voice low but infused with a steel-like authority. "I need a favor. Something happened, and I want it addressed immediately. No, don't escalate yet, just watch for my signal." She ended the call and slipped the phone away, her expression unreadable, like a chess master who had just moved a pawn and was waiting for the inevitable checkmate. Meanwhile, in the front of the plane, Karen was moving through the cabin with a bounce in her step, checking on passengers and serving drinks with a robotic smile, feeling a perverse sense of satisfaction at having corrected the seating arrangement. She felt she had protected the sanctity of first class, unaware that she had just ignited a fuse that would blow her career apart. However, a nagging doubt began to scratch at the back of her mind. There was something about the way Elena had complied, so quietly, so confidently, that unsettled her. Back in economy, a younger flight attendant named Sophie approached Elena, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" Sophie asked softly, offering a cup of water. Elena looked up, her smile warm and genuine, a stark contrast to the icy mask she had worn for Karen. "I'm fine, thank you, Sophie. Just a mix-up," she said, glancing at the girl's name tag. 7 minutes passed. The intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us." The standard announcement played, but Elena's eyes flicked toward the front of the plane, her notebook open again, her pen scratching a single, decisive line. She unlocked her phone one more time and sent a cryptic text. "They'll call soon. Let me know when it's done." Up in the galley, Karen was chatting with Tom, a senior flight attendant who had seen it all. "Did you see that woman?" Karen asked, fishing for validation. "The one I moved. She looked out of place." Tom frowned, leaning against the counter, his experience warning him of danger. "Out of place? Karen, you'd better hope you didn't mess up. First-class passengers don't take kindly to being bumped without cause." Before Karen could defend her prejudice, the in-flight phone buzzed, a harsh, demanding sound that made her jump. Tom picked it up, listened, and his face went pale. He handed the receiver to Karen. "It's for you. They're asking for you by name." Karen's heart skipped a beat. Her hands trembled as she took the phone. "This is Karen," she said, her voice wavering. The voice on the other end was cold, professional, and terrifying. "This is the executive office. We've received a direct complaint regarding a first-class passenger. We need a report upon landing. Do not alter seating without justification again." The color drained from Karen's face. She stammered a reply and hung up, her hands shaking violently. "What is it?" Tom asked. "Nothing," she lied, but her eyes darted nervously toward the curtain separating her from the main cabin. She peeked through the curtain. Eleanor was sitting there, reading a magazine, looking for all the world like she hadn't a care. But as Karen watched, Elena looked up and offered the faintest, most chilling smile. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards. Karen tried to return to work, but her movements were jerky, her mind racing. Who was this girl? Why was the executive office calling mid-flight? The anxiety began to gnaw at her stomach like a starving animal. Tom pulled her aside again, handing her a folded note. "The captain wants to see you, now." Karen felt the blood rush from her head. She walked to the cockpit, her legs feeling like lead, knowing that the sanctuary of her authority was crumbling brick by brick. Captain Reynolds turned in his seat as she entered, his face thunderous. "Miranda, or Karen, whoever you are today," he snapped. "We just got another call. The passenger you moved, Miss Elena Ross, she is not just a passenger. She is connected to the board of directors. She's a major shareholder. You just kicked one of the owners of this airline out of her seat." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She gasped. "I didn't know. I thought—" "You thought what?" The captain interrupted. "That she didn't look the part. You better pray this doesn't end your career. Get back out there. Apologize. and ensure she is treated like royalty. Karen stumbled out of the cockpit, her world spinning, the realization of her catastrophic mistake crashing down on her. She had judged a book by its cover, and that book was about to rewrite her entire life. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from awkward tension to a palpable dread, at least for Karen Miller, whose hands were now trembling so badly she spilled coffee on her tray while preparing for the service she was terrified to perform. Every step toward the economy cabin felt like walking to the gallows. She looked toward the back, where Eleanor Ross sat, calm and composed, chatting politely with the passenger next to her, completely unbothered by the chaos she had silently orchestrated. Karen leaned against the galley counter, hyperventilating. Tom watched her with a mix of pity and, "I told you so." "She has ties to the board," Karen whispered to Tom, her voice cracking. "The captain just told me." Tom's eyes widened. "The board. Karen, you are done. You didn't just poke a bear, you poked the dragon." Elena checked her watch. The timing was perfect. She sent another text. "Almost time." A man across the aisle whispered to her, "That flight attendant looks like she's about to faint. You okay?" Eleanor smiled, that same cryptic, powerful smile. "Everything is under control." Just then, the galley phone rang again. Karen stared at it as if it were a bomb. She answered it. "This is the captain. Corporate wants her given full priority service immediately. Personally apologize. Make it right." It was an order, not a request. Karen swallowed her pride, which tasted like ash, and prepared a glass of sparkling water on a silver tray. She was about to perform the most humiliating walk of her life, the reverse of the one she had forced Elena to take. She approached Elena's row, her face pale, her smile brittle and fake. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. "Miss Ross," Karen began, her voice trembling, softer than anyone had ever heard it. "I wanted to personally apologize for the inconvenience earlier. It was a misunderstanding on my part." Eleanor looked up from her book, her gaze piercing. She didn't reach for the water. "A misunderstanding," Eleanor repeated, testing the word like a bad wine. "Is that what we're calling it?" Karen placed the water down with a shaky hand. "Please accept this as a token of apology." Elena looked at the glass, then back at Karen. "Thank you," she said, her voice neutral but cutting. "But I think it's going to take more than a drink to fix this." The rejection was polite, but absolute. Karen stammered, "If there is anything else?" Elena cut her off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I believe the airline will address this matter appropriately after we land." It was a dismissal. Karen retreated to the galley, her face burning with shame, knowing that her apology had been seen for exactly what it was, a desperate attempt to save her own skin, not a genuine act of contrition. "She's not done," Karen whispered to Tom. "She's taking this all the way." As the plane began its descent, the captain's voice announced their arrival. But for Karen, it sounded like a countdown to doom. Eleanor remained in her seat, refusing offers of extra snacks or pillows from the sudden influx of attentive staff. She watched the city lights appear below, feeling the satisfaction of justice in motion. When the wheels touched the tarmac, the cabin erupted in the usual bustle. But Elena stayed seated, typing one last message. "We've landed. Be ready." She waited until the aisle cleared, standing up with a grace that commanded attention. As she walked to the exit, the crew, including a terrified Karen, stood by the door. "Thank you for flying with us, Miss Ross," Karen squeaked, unable to meet Eleanor's eyes. Eleanor paused, looking Karen up and down. "I'm sure we'll be in touch," she said smoothly, and stepped off the plane. Karen let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Thinking the worst was over. She was wrong. 2 uniformed security officers marched onto the jet bridge, pushing past disembarking passengers, their eyes scanning the crew. "Are you Karen Miller?" one officer barked. Karen gasped, clutching her chest. "Yes? We need you to come with us. We have questions regarding an incident on this flight." The color drained from her face completely, as Tom and Sophie watched in stunned silence. Karen was escorted off the plane like a criminal, exactly the way she had made Elena feel hours before. The stark, white room in airport security felt like a prison cell. Karen sat at a metal table, the silence ringing in her ears, her career flashing before her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she sobbed to the officers. "I was just following protocol. I thought she didn't belong." The officer looked at her with disdain. "Protocol! You moved a valid ticket holder based on feelings. That's not protocol, Miss Miller. That's discrimination. And the woman you moved is a board member. The reality of her bias was laid bare, stripped of any excuses. You are suspended pending a disciplinary hearing," the officer stated, delivering the final blow. Meanwhile, outside the terminal, a sleek black sedan awaited Elena. Her driver opened the door, and she slid inside, immediately checking her email. A notification from the board confirmed they were launching a full investigation and reviewing training protocols. She smiled. It wasn't about revenge. It was about systemic change. The next morning, while Karen was sitting in her apartment, staring at a termination notice, paralyzed by regret and the public shame of her actions, Elena was walking into a high-stakes meeting with Arthur Sterling, the CEO of the airline. Arthur, a silver-haired man who usually exuded power, looked humble and nervous as he shook Elena's hand. "Miss Ross, I cannot apologize enough," he began. Elena sat down, her posture erect. "Apologies are words, Arthur. I want action. I want a complete overhaul of the sensitivity training, and I want it monitored." The meeting lasted hours, but by the end, Elena had secured a commitment for measurable change. She wasn't just owning the airline in a financial sense, she was owning its moral compass. Days turned into weeks. The airline announced the new Ross protocol for passenger treatment, publicly acknowledging their failure without naming Karen, though the industry knew. Karen, however, was not entirely lost. Stripped of her job and forced to confront the ugliness of her own bias, she hit rock bottom. She saw Elena on the news, speaking not with anger, but with a vision for a better future. Something broke inside Karen, the defensive wall she had built. She sat down and wrote an email. It wasn't a plea for her job back. It was a raw, honest apology. "I failed to see you as a person. I am committed to learning." Elena received the email. She read it twice. She could have deleted it, but she saw the flicker of genuine remorse. She replied, "Accountability is the first step. Use this to be better." It was a grace Karen didn't deserve, but one Elena gave freely. Months later, Elena boarded another flight. The atmosphere was different, lighter, warmer. The crew smiled with genuine kindness. As she settled into seat 2A, a flight attendant approached. It was Sophie, now wearing the pin of a senior purser. "Welcome back, Miss Ross," Sophie smiled. Elena nodded, looking out the window at the clouds. She took out her notebook and wrote one final line. "Change begins with the courage to sit still when they tell you to move." She had turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of dignity. Thanks for listening to this story. If you believe that everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look, smash that like button. What would you do if you were Elena? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories.